Let's welcome Vicky Felstein of the Resource Podcast to the stage to kick off our session with her insights on mindset, behavioural tolerance.
Little check. Hello, how you going, team? So I asked for a mic instead of the standing over here because I do move a little bit and it's going to be a little bit interactive. So all of the people who are sitting in the crowd who are like, I came here just to have a rest, I wanted to stay off my feet. What I am going to get you guys to do, just because maybe you have been listening to a few things or having a few chats with people, I'd love for you to just connect with the person next to you. Just check in, say hello, and I want you to do a best of 3 paper, scissors, rock, and whoever wins, let me know. Go for it. Whoever won over here is going to have to go with the gentleman behind because he didn't get a partner. Awesome. Have you checked in with your partner as well, how their IMARC experience is? Beautiful. Awesome. Okay, so bring it back up to the front, team. I can imagine that maybe you have had a fair few conversations over the last couple of days, but maybe it wasn't necessarily checking in on yourself or checking in on each other. When we speak about behaviour, when we speak about mental health, when we're speaking about anything when it comes to culture, doesn't matter what we do in the world, what we do at IMARC or what we do outside of here, we're all in people. Would you guys agree? Absolutely. And would you guys agree that it's not always easy to manage people? Who's a manager in the room? Who manages people like a boss and has absolutely figured it out? None of us, yeah? So if your hand was nearly about to come up, we'd love you to come to the front and share with us, impart some wisdom around what it is to lead and how you guys are going with that. But we are touching on behavioural tolerance in the mindset, and I suppose it'd probably be remiss of me not to share with you why I'm here having this conversation. So as I was introduced, I've got a podcast called the Resource Podcast, where I have hard conversations and make them easier. And how that is done is by having conversations with the people behind the company and the stories behind those people. And where it pertains to speaking about culture is, I started the podcast alongside the 5-4 inquiry into sexual harassment of women about 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago now. And I didn't realise the inquiry was actually happening. The reason why I started the podcast was because I had been in mining, I was a wellness advisor. One of the toughest jobs that I'd done, not necessarily the job itself, but definitely being isolated, being away, missing out on things. Who's in FIFO or has been in FIFO and been out in mining away and done that before? Who would agree that it can be really challenging? Yeah. Who loves it? Who loves having that few weeks off here and there? Yeah. You're like, yes, me. I love that bit. And so for me, it was an insight into an industry that I didn't really know much about. My dad, when we came from England, he went up into mining for 6 months to a year, but he didn't stay for too long. So for me, it was the first time I had interaction with the industry. My brother-in-law had been in mining for the last 20 years, so the only interaction I had was from my brother-in-law, and what he actually told me was, "Oh, be careful. Don't go up into that industry. Make sure you don't go to the bar. Make sure you don't, get too friendly with anybody, and make sure that you're careful." Did anybody else have that warning going into mining? Do you agree that maybe there would be some younger people at the moment who might be getting that warning going into the industry based on the media, the conversations that's happening and that have been happening over the last 3 years? And would you agree that while we're talking about it more, it's been something that's been happening for a very long time? Would you also agree that it isn't just mining? And I'll share with you a little bit about what I go up on site and talk about, but my first 2 weeks in mining, I went up there, I was a wellness advisor, I was in one of the bars putting up posters, and I was called over to a table of about 10 fellows. And I wandered over, a little bit naive, and I remember getting there, and one of the guys looks at me dead in the eyes and he says, "What would you do if I bent you over the table?" And I was shocked. That face came onto my face as well. And I remember my mind was racing. I froze. I didn't know what to do. And I walked away. But something, you know how you get that little voice in your head that says, go back and say something, go back and do something about this. So I did. I walked around and I said, I'll watch you on a plane home if you speak to me like that again. Yes. I went, yes, good on you. I went and told my colleague and I said, oh my gosh, you're not going to believe what just happened to me. I had this person say this, and she says, get over it, it's just mining. How do you guys feel about that? Is that the truth? Have people had some really great experiences while being in mining in the resource sector? Yes. I've been in it for 7 years now, and while I've had some untoward experiences, for the most part, I've had some pretty good experiences as well. But from starting the podcast, the reason why I started that is about 2 years into my experience of being in mining, as a wellness advisor, becoming friends with a lot of the crew up on site, loving my job, settling into what it is to be in mining and be in FIFO, I had another experience. So I was in the bar this one particular night, and this is when the restrictions hadn't been in, and it was Valentine's Day. A guy who I knew but not really well, but well enough to say, hey mate, are you okay? And he's like, I'm not. And I said, did you want a hug? And so I gave him a hug. And I felt the back of my neck and it was wet. And I was like, what did you just do? And he said, I sniffed your hair, and his friend said he licked your neck. And so the reason why I share this, and I can see some of the faces, is that when we talk about mind style tolerance, or when we talk about tolerance of behaviour in general, is for some people their workplace is, I would say, not their favourite place to go, but when we speak about culture, their culture is pretty good. But for other people, it can be one of the most traumatising, one of the most horrendous places to be when they've had those experiences. And the reason why I share that with you and why I share the experiences that I've had is because I know that they're not just my own. I know based on the podcast that I've had for the last couple of years that my experiences, while there's no comparison, it gets worse. And so that's why we're having this conversation. But something that I've learned in the last year, I've been working for a company called Strong Minds, Strong Minds, where we go up into the mining industry. It's an 8-month program. And I get to go up and talk about mental health and suicide prevention with, you may know, Soa, the big Tongan fellow. He's a bit hard to miss. But there's 2 things that I love about working at that place, and I love about working with that company, is that Soa, a big 6-foot-something Tongan, he gains respect as soon as he walks into the room. He's an ex-UFC fighter. But it doesn't end there. Whenever I'm on site with Soa, he ensures that I'm treated the same way that he is. He ensures that he speaks to me the right way around other people. He ensures that if we're having a laugh, it's professional. He ensures that he is aware of the privilege that he holds by being in the space that I might not be as accepted as he is. And would you agree that times are changing? Absolutely. And we're going down the right path. And also, the reason why we have, the respectful behaviours, the reason why we have these conversations, and the reason why we have the podcast is because some people are unaware that those things are happening. And so for the people who are unaware of those things that are happening, it's about activating and acknowledging that those things exist. And would you agree that it can sometimes be a little bit uncomfortable? So I asked the question of you who have been in mining previously. Who has ever felt, actually it's not even just mining, who's been in school, in a sporting club, started something new and wanted desperately to fit in? Absolutely. Who's changed their behaviour a little bit to fit in? I try not to, but it's hard sometimes. And I remember thinking back, now as a woman, I remember thinking back going into mining. It was only 7 years ago, but with the interactions that I ended up having, I did want to fit in. My language changed, how I showed up changed, how I had conversations with people changed. And it wasn't until I took myself out of that and I now work in this industry where I get to go up and have these conversations with people, is that I did code switch. I did change who I was. And in the world that we have grown up in, especially myself, if you are not the strongest person in the room, you've got to do everything you possibly can to make sure that you are that strongest person. So that's what I ended up doing when I was up there. I become really, I'm a nice person, I would say. I've got Danny here, who, from the mining club. I would say I'm a semi-nice person. And so for me, having conversations with people and fitting in somewhere isn't so hard for me to do. But something that's different for me now, and having the education around tolerance and how you have to be what you're preaching, is that sometimes just trying to fit in means that you're tolerating a lot more behaviour than is acceptable. Who has done that before? Maybe there's been something that you've walked past, maybe there's been something that you've seen, or maybe actually you've had an experience yourself and you haven't ended up speaking up or saying anything. I've absolutely had that experience before. And so the conversations that we've been having over the last 3 years is that we stand up and we say something. And so what has changed for me in the going up onto site is hearing from the crew who are up on site, because I used to be the person, I started a company, Culture 101. When I went up on site, all guns blazing, empowerment, we've got to change this, there's broken, the industry is broken, there's so many things happening. All guns blazing I went in. Do you think anybody would take anything on board? Absolutely not. I went up into mining like this. I've got the answer. Everybody must do this and you must not do that. And you can imagine that went down like a ton of bricks in it. And so what the blessing has been in going up in and talking about mental health and suicide prevention is speaking to the crew about the issues that they face and how they feel about when we're having these conversations around respect. And so the biggest thing that I learnt was I had to check myself in that. I had to check around my own behaviour, how I was code switching, and the conversations that I was having, and if they were a way for me to fit in, or whether they were a way forward in having the conversations that will lead into a better industry. And so when we ask the question of the crew, we go up and speak about suicide prevention, and unfortunately there's 3,200 people who die by suicide. And of those 3,200 people, 75% of that are male. And our mining industry, while it's changing and while it's growing, is male dominated. And so the people in that industry, a lot of the guys, when asked that question or when I speak to them about why do they think that is? Why is it that men 75% more likely to take their life by suicide? What do you think that they would say? Or what comes up? Men tend not to talk. Men tend not to, I've heard it a few times, where it's none of my business. I don't want to step up. I don't want to say anything. But the difference and the change has been is that we get to be that change. We get to step up and say something. And what I learned from actually sharing that up in mining, when I asked that question of the behaviour, is this just FIFO? They were as mortified as everybody else here was. Because unfortunately, it's the behaviour of a few that impacts many, right? So it impacts the people who are up doing it, and it impacts a whole generation of people that have the finger pointed at them. So I've tried really hard now, and when I'm presenting and when I'm having conversations, is to hear what it's like to be in that industry and to hear what it's like to have the finger pointed at you. And a lot of the time the conversation leads to that the pendulum seems to have shifted all the way over one way. Would you guys agree with that? And it seems like, when I first went up onto site, I would be, making sure that I wasn't hugging anybody, making sure that I was changing the way that I was. And what the difference has been now going up is everybody's head seems to be down a little bit more. People don't know what to do, how to speak, how to act. In some occasions. Some places have it down packed and some might not. But that's the difference of when I went up with my finger pointed to now listening to how people are having those experiences. And so as I mentioned, people will do anything to fit in. So I would love, you guys chose the right crowd to be a part of. If you guys could find a partner, I want you to figure out who partner A is and who partner B is. If you don't want to be involved in this, that's okay, you can stay seated. But stand up for me and I would like you to find a partner A and partner B and introduce yourself, please. Just ask the person if they're happy to be involved. So find out who partner A is and find out who partner B is. And once you've figured out who partner A is, put your hand up for me, please. So partner A, yep. Once you've figured out who partner A is, put your hand up. And then partner B. Wonderful. Okay, so again, you don't have to do anything that you don't want to do, but what I would love for you guys to do is partner A ask partner B if they can have a hug. Partner A ask partner B if you'd like a hug. Again, you don't have to do anything you don't want to do. And then again, on the other side, I would love partner B to ask partner A if they would like a hug. Awesome. Okay, so high five your partner and say thank you. And I really appreciate you guys being involved with that, because I could see that some of you guys didn't necessarily know each other, so I commend you guys for being a part of that. Can I ask the question, who had a hug and enjoyed it and it was great and it was the best thing that's happened all day? Yeah, wonderful. It's okay. You're not getting measured on this, it's fine. Who didn't have a hug? Who didn't have a hug? Did you have a conversation about not hugging? And it was okay, it wasn't awkward too much, it was just, I don't want to hug, it's fine? Yep, awesome. And then who hugged their partner? Nobody's going to get offended here, right? Nobody's going to get offended. Who hugged their partner and didn't really want to hug? It's okay if we don't want to admit it. It happens. So I do this activity at almost every presentation that I go to, because it really reiterates that as human beings, sometimes we will do things we don't want to do just to avoid being awkward. Sometimes we will have conversations with people where we showcase our boundaries, we showcase what we like and what we don't like. You didn't want to hug, maybe you hug other people, and maybe you hug your family, but you don't hug somebody in a professional setting. And then you had a conversation with somebody who enjoys having a hug and it was fine. And so when we're talking about mind-site tolerances, I know it's a far-fetched kind of thing to talk about, but there are things that are still happening within the industry, in defence, in medical, all over the world that are happening that people don't necessarily want to be involved in, but we still do it anyway. And even though it can be awkward to have those conversations, it can sometimes turn out the best way. So I urge you guys to have those conversations, and I can imagine that if you're sitting in these seats here at this stage, then you're more than likely involved in these conversations anyway. But sharing with people your experiences that you've had, because enlightening others on the experiences that you've had might enlighten them for things that they've never thought about or experienced themselves. So before I leave, I wanted to share with you guys as well, and I wanted to ask you guys some questions, because I've got some t-shirts of the Resource Podcast. Is there anything that, taking away from today, is there anything that you can see is a really big change that we need to make in mining? You don't have to tell me now. I'm going to give them to you out on the stage. And then another question, if we're unable to make that change, are we able to make a ripple effect to help others to make that change? Yes. Thank you so much for having me today, guys. I've got the t-shirts there. I would love to have a chat with you and keep those conversations going, and make sure that if you hugged your partner, then you introduce yourself to them properly. Thank you so much.